They say asking for help is a strength, a quiet courage that binds people together. But reality often whispers something very different. Sometimes the ones who never ask are not strong. They are simply used to standing alone. What if independence is not always freedom, but a habit formed in silence? What if self-reliance isn't confidence, but a carefully built wall? And what if the inability to ask for help is not a choice, but a story the mind learned to survive? There is a quiet pattern, rarely noticed, often misunderstood. A pattern where strength becomes isolation and silence becomes identity. This is not about pride, it is about something deeper. Let's begin.
There's a certain kind of person who never asks, not because they don't need help, but because something inside them refuses to reach. On the surface, it looks like strength. They handle everything alone. They solve problems quietly. They carry weight without showing strain. People admire them. They call them independent, mature, strong. But admiration can be misleading, because what looks like strength often feels like isolation. There's no hesitation in doing things alone, no instinct to turn toward others. Even in moments of overwhelm, the reflex is the same. Figure it out, fix it, carry it. And slowly, this becomes more than behavior. It becomes identity. I don't need anyone. I can handle it. I'll manage. But beneath these statements, there is rarely confidence. There's familiarity, a quiet, practiced distance from depending on others. Because asking feels unnatural, uncomfortable, almost wrong. Why is it so difficult to say a simple sentence like, "Can you help me?" Why does the throat tighten even when the need is real? It's not laziness. It's not pride in the way people assume. It's something quieter, a learned silence, a way of existing where needs are handled internally because somewhere along the way it felt safer that way. And over time, this silence becomes invisible, even to the person living inside it. They don't notice what's missing because they've never known another way.
No one is born this way. No child enters the world thinking, "I should handle everything alone." At the beginning, there is only instinct to reach, to cry, to depend. But something happens along the way. Sometimes help wasn't there. Not consistently, not safely, not in the way it was needed. And so the reaching slowly changed. Maybe the child asked and was ignored, or worse, dismissed. Don't be so sensitive. Figure it out yourself. Stop depending on others. Maybe the help came with a cost. Judgment, frustration, emotional withdrawal. A sigh, a look that said, "You're too much." And so a quiet equation formed. Needing equals burden. Asking equals rejection. And when a child learns that equation, they don't stop needing. They just stop showing it. Needs don't disappear, they go underground. Like water beneath dry soil, still present, still flowing, just no longer visible. So the child adapts. They become easier, quieter, more self-contained. They learn to solve their own problems, to comfort themselves, to not interrupt, not ask, not rely. And over time, this adaptation becomes something else, a personality. Not asking for help doesn't feel like a decision anymore. It feels like who they are. But identity can be deceptive, because what feels natural is often just what was repeated, what was learned, what was necessary to belong or to avoid pain. And somewhere deep inside, a younger version still exists, the one who once reached out without hesitation, the one who didn't question whether their needs were allowed. But that version grew quiet. Not because it disappeared, but because it was never answered the way it needed.
The mind does not choose patterns randomly. It learns them, and then protects them. What began as adaptation slowly becomes strategy. Not conscious, not deliberate, but precise. If asking once led to discomfort, the brain remembers. Not as a story, but as a feeling. And feelings are powerful teachers. So over time, the mind constructs a quiet rule. Avoid what hurts, repeat what feels safe. Self-reliance becomes safety. Control becomes comfort. Because when everything depends on you, nothing can be taken away. No disappointment, no unmet expectations, no waiting for someone who may not come. There is a certain relief in that, but relief is not the same as peace. Inside, something more complex is happening. The nervous system begins to associate vulnerability with risk. Opening up feels like exposure. Depending feels like losing control. And control feels necessary. So even when help is available, something resists. A pause, a hesitation, a quiet voice that says, "It's easier if you just do it yourself." But is it easier or just more familiar? Because familiarity can disguise itself as truth. The brain is not asking, "Is this good for you?" It is asking, "Have you survived this before?" And the answer is yes. You survived by not asking, by not needing too much, by staying contained. So the mind repeats the pattern. Again and again, even when the environment has changed, even when people are different, even when help is safe. The old logic remains, not because it is right, but because it once worked. And the hardest patterns to break are the ones that once protected you.
There is a quiet weight that comes with carrying everything alone. At first, it feels manageable, even empowering. You solve your own problems. You don't depend. You don't wait. You don't risk disappointment. But over time, something begins to shift. The strength that once felt solid starts to feel heavy. Because being the one who handles everything means there is no place to rest, no space to fall apart, no moment where someone else steps in and says, "You don't have to carry this alone." And so the pressure builds, slowly, silently, invisibly. You become the stable one, the reliable one, the one others lean on. But who do you lean on? It's a question that often goes unanswered, not because there's no one there, but because reaching still feels foreign. So even in the presence of others, there is distance, a subtle emotional gap. Conversations stay on the surface. Struggles remain unspoken. Pain is processed in private. And loneliness takes on a different shape. Not the loud kind, not the obvious kind, but a quiet, persistent absence of being truly seen. Because to be seen requires being known, and to be known requires letting someone in. But letting someone in means undoing a lifetime of holding back. So the conflict deepens. A part of you longs for connection, for ease, for someone to share the weight. And another part resists, tightens, withdraws, stays guarded. Because the wall that keeps pain out also keeps closeness away. And this is the hidden cost. Not weakness, not failure, but exhaustion. The kind that comes from being strong for too long without ever being supported in return. There is a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something begins to shift. Not in behavior, not yet, but in awareness. A subtle recognition that carrying everything alone was never meant to be permanent. That strength, when stretched too far, turns into something else, something heavier, something isolating. And for the first time, a question appears. What if this isn't the only way to live? It doesn't come with answers. It doesn't come with sudden change. Just a pause, a soft interruption in the pattern. Because awareness doesn't break walls overnight. It simply reveals that they exist. And that realization can feel unsettling. If the identity of being self-sufficient begins to loosen, what takes its place? If control is softened, what replaces it? There is uncertainty here and hesitation.
because asking for help is not just an action, it is a shift in trust, not only in others, but in the belief that your needs are allowed to exist outside of you, that they can be held without being judged, dismissed, or rejected. And this is where the quiet transformation begins. Not in grand gestures, not in sudden vulnerability, but in the smallest internal permission. Maybe you don't have to do everything alone. Maybe strength can include softness. Maybe independence can coexist with connection. And maybe asking is not a loss of control, but a return to something more human. Something that was always there before the silence, before the adaptation. The part of you that once reached without fear. If this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you recognized these patterns, then perhaps you've been carrying more than anyone ever noticed, and maybe more than you were ever meant to carry alone. There is nothing wrong with learning to be strong, but there is also nothing wrong with unlearning the idea that strength means silence. You are not the only one who learned to hold everything inside. You are not the only one who finds it difficult to ask. And slowly, gently, that can change. Not all at once, not perfectly, but in small, almost invisible ways. A pause before saying, "I'll handle it." A moment of honesty, even if it feels unfamiliar. If you'd like to stay connected to reflections like this, to a space that quietly explores the hidden corners of the human mind and heart, you're welcome to be part of it. And if you feel comfortable, you can share your thoughts below, not because you have to, but because sometimes your words might help someone else feel a little less alone. Take care of yourself.